What is up, everyone? My name is Mr. J, and today I am very excited to bring to you my Sky Striker Dragoon deck profile. This deck is my heart and my soul. Please keep in mind it is not a pure Sky Striker build as I go through the deck profile. And it's not tailored to beat the meta specifically. It's more well-rounded and set to compete more in local tournaments or the rogue matches you will see in Duelingbook. Anyway, this is an in-depth profile, and I will explain each of my card choices as I go along. Without further ado, let's get into the deck profile. Okay, I'm going to do something a bit different and list out the play starters first. So we have a total of 11 starters in the Sky Striker Dragoon build. We have 3 copies of Sky Striker Ace Ray. Ray is everything. You're always happy to see her because she does so much for the deck. Her ability to tag out into a Sky Striker Link or to bring herself back from the grave when your opponent gets rid of your Sky Striker Link is nothing short of amazing. The tag out ability is really nice, and you start to miss it when you open her counterpart instead. Speaking of which, we are running 3 copies of Sky Striker Ace Roze. Alright, so let me explain. Let me give this example. Dogmatica Invoked runs 13 play starters. That's 3 Alistair, 3 Magical Meltdown, 3 Ecclesia, 3 Nadir Servant, and 1 Terraforming. And that's not including Dogmatica Punishment as a delayed starter. If you are a Sky Striker player, you know nowadays you usually only lose because you don't have access to Ray or to Hornet Drones turn 1 or 2. Why not then max out on 3 copies of Roze to get your engine going? I see some pure Sky Striker builds only run 1 Roze, and I think that's crazy. If you don't get your Striker engine going, the bottom line is you're going to lose that game. You're not going to win disrupting plays while having no way to generate card advantage or to apply pressure to your opponent. Yes, I would rather see Ray because of the tag out ability, but Roze is necessary because, as we know, Mobilize Engage is still banned. Roze is also a great way to out Red Eye's Dark Dragoon, and it's also a free body on the field for Verta Anaconda. You can see this in action in one of my duels versus an Outlich Dragoon player, which I will link in the description below. Either way, I never regret seeing Roze in my opening hand. I never regret seeing her in general. I mean, look at her. Ray is still bae though. Moving on. And of course, we have the 1 copy of Reinforcements of the Army and the 1 copy of Hornet Drones. And these just, of course, act as 2 more starter cards. Then I have 1 copy of Area Zero. Now don't crucify me, okay? I am thinking about bumping this up to 2 copies. Some people play this over Roze and call it a starter, and I don't get how. In order for Area Zero to be a starter, your opponent would have to pop it, or you would have to pop it. And the only way you're going to pop it turn 1 is off of a Jamming Waves or a multi-roll. Jamming Waves is not being ran at 3, and multi-roll is only at 1. Either way, I believe I will bump it up to 2 eventually. Then for our last 3 starter cards, I have the Spice, or the Controversy, depending on how seeing 3 copies of Red Eye's Fusion in a deck makes you feel. Red Eye's Fusion is really interesting in Sky Striker because you can essentially make it unblockable. Normally, you would not fire this off all willy-nilly. No. If you open Fusion and a Striker starter, you can do normal Striker plays and then either with Kagari or Shizuku add multi-roll. That way the next turn, you can activate multi-roll effect and make it so your opponent cannot respond to Red Eye's Fusion. This is the most efficient way to use it. You can do a similar play if you have Mystic Mine on the field versus a full field of opponent's monsters. I wouldn't fire this off without any protection because Ash Blossom is a card. As a last resort though, you could always just fire it off turn 1 or turn 2 if you really didn't open any other starter card. And let's make it clear, by starter I mean you have some presence on the board. That's it for our starter cards though. Before moving on to the hand traps, I want to present to you the bricks of the deck in all their glory. One copy of both Dark Magician and Red Eye's Black Dragon. I absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, hate opening these cards, but Red Eye's Dark Dragoon is worth it. And hey, in certain scenarios when your opponent has no more monsters left on the field, you could actually summon Dark Magician and attack for game. For the hand traps, we have 3 copies of Nibiru, the Primal Being. So I want to make the statement now, if you plan on taking this deck to a serious tournament where you know there will be a lot of Drytron, obviously you would switch these out for Skullmeisters or Ghost Spells instead. So all the hand traps here, again, it's really up to personal preference. I went to a friendly tournament a few weeks ago, and this Sky Striker build was prepped with Drolls, Bells, and Skullmeisters, and they were useless versus Rogue and Tier 2 decks. Like honestly, the whole tournament, I wish the Bells I had drawn in my hand were Nibirus. That's how bad it was. So that's something to keep in mind. And actually, if you played on Dueling Book, people have started citing out Nibiru so much that players don't even play around it anymore. So it might see a resurgence. Next, of course, we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Ash is Ash, I can't say anything else. The best hand trap, hands down. Forehead gang all day, day. Then we have 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. Okay, so if you play against Eldritch and you open Droll, you've essentially opened a blank. So in the main deck, this is really risky. You could definitely just put Skullmeisters in place of these Drolls. Again, up to personal preference, but these definitely came in clutch during my matches in the Rogue tourney, as my friends love playing decks that search 15 times in one turn. Then we have 3 copies of Effect Veiler. I know I'm about to get so much shit for this. I am running this for the Halki Fibrax / Selene / access code package. Truth be told, the Halki Fibrax play is just way too strong. Access code is just a game ender. Again, if you're going against meta, this card could be a blank, but not really. You could always just Veiler the Cloud Castle for VW or the Union Carrier for Drytron. If you go against a Rogue or Tier 2 deck, then Effect Veiler is still really good, as it's not once per turn. I can't tell you guys enough. Every time my opponent goes into a Verte Anaconda, this is the card I want in my hand. Alright, moving on to the spells and traps. To start us off, we have the 3 mandatory copies of Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor. Negating your opponent's monster effects is cool, but taking your opponent's monster is even better. Stealing an opponent's monster and going into a Verte Anaconda, that's a great feeling. Great card and is a must play at 3. Then we have 2 copies of Sky Striker Maneuver Afterburners. My guys, I love this card. Destroying opponent's cards is always fun. I wish it banished, but the bonus effect once you get at least 3 spells in the grave to pop a monster and a back row, amazing. And then you can recycle this with Kagari and do it again. This is such a good card in the grind, and it's not bad starting off to bait out a negate or to break a board. Next is 1 copy of Sky Striker Maneuver Jamming Waves. I wasn't playing this before, but after fighting Eldritch after the 50th time on Dueling Book, I decided to put it in, and I don't regret it. The counterpart to Afterburners, Jamming Waves comes in clutch versus back row heavy decks. Then we have the 1 copy of Multi-Roll. Add 1 sadly because you can only play 1. Multi-Roll is a very important card that lets you grind. It lets you trigger your Area 0 effect to summon Ray, and activating its effect makes it so your opponent cannot respond to your spell card activations for the rest of the turn. As you can imagine, that's kind of broken, probably the reason it's at 1. And an unblockable Widow Anchor or Red Eye's Fusion can give your opponent some serious PTSD. If this card was at 2, I would definitely max out on Area Zeros as well. Alright, next we have 1 copy of Sky Striker Mecha Shark Cannon.
You serious?
Now again, don't crucify me. You can take out any other cards and put in the 2nd or 3rd Shark Cannon. I just played at 1 because this is a dedicated going 2nd build, and Shark Cannon does not help you break established boards. Other than that, Shark Cannon is amazing. Banishing your opponent's key monsters in the graveyard or reviving an opponent's Crystal Wing or Shen Shen is downright hilarious. I do have the other 2 copies in the side just in case I get into a grindy matchup. Next, I am running the 1 Terraforming and the 1 Mystic Mine. If you're mad about only playing 1 Shark Cannon, then you can just take this out and put in the 2nd Shark Cannon. I used to run mine at 3, but it's just so meh sometimes. Don't get me wrong, against a Drytron player, dropping Mystic Mine game 1 usually means they're going to scoop, but I would rather just play cards that advance the game state. I might take this last copy out and put in the secondary 0, but I would be lying if I said Mystic Mine didn't win me lots of games all by itself. And then we are running, of course, the 3 mandatory God cards. That's 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, 1 Raigeki, and 1 Called by the Grave. If you've seen my other deck profiles, then you know how much I love these 1-ofs. Never regret seeing them in my opening hand going 2nd. I honestly think the only counter argument against running these 3 is because they're 1-ofs, which is, I don't know, in my opinion, not a very good argument, because yeah, that's like saying I'm not running Gazelle and Salamangreat because it's at 1. Yes, I know it's searchable in Salamangreat, but you get me, right? It's at 1 for a reason. Play it. But that's just my opinion. I love opening one of these against my opponent, turn 2, and then seeing the look on your opponent's face and thinking you sacked them. It's all skill, bro. It's all skill. I promise. I promise. You can't open it if you don't put it in your deck. That's all I'm going to say. For our last cards in the main deck, I am trying 2 copies of Solemn Strike. Strike is just amazing against Zeus or any monster for that matter. The fact that your opponent cannot respond to this card with monster effects, that's what makes Solemn Strike so good. Having a Dragoon on the field back with a Solemn Strike feels so amazing. Having a Solemn Strike set the turn prior also means that your Red Ice Fusion is almost guaranteed to go off. But that's it for the main deck. That's a 41 card main deck. Okay, moving on to the extra deck. To start us off, we are running 2 copies of Sky Striker Ace Hayate. Only 2 because I had to make room for the access code package. Hayate is very important in the deck as it allows you to tutor cards into the graveyard to pick up with Kagari later, or you can send Ray or Roze to the graveyard for follow-ups. Next, we have 3 copies of Sky Striker Ace Kagari. Oh baby, will you look at that gorgeous artwork. Kagari can low-key punish me anytime she wants. Okay, all jokes aside, Kagari is Kagari, and this card was so busted when Engage was at 3. It's still very busted, as it allows you to grind out your opponent by recurring key spells like Widow Anchor or Afterburners. One of the best striker links for sure. Then we have 3 copies of Sky Striker Ace Shizuku. Shiz is equally as amazing. So, a successful Hayate into Kagari into Shiz means you essentially win +2 in terms of card advantage, as Hayate and Kagari can get you the multi-roll, and Shiz can search the area 0 in the end phase, for example. Also, the attack debuff of Shizuku can also come up against your opponent's monsters, especially late game. Next, I am running 1 copy of Sky Striker Ace Kaina. My reasoning with this is that you don't want your Sky Striker engine to die, especially in a grind game. Kaina can usually ensure that your Sky Striker engine stays online so that you can continue to play on your following turn. If you don't like Kaina, you can just put in the third Hayate, but Kaina has saved my bacon plenty of times. Then we have one copy of Sky Striker Ace Zeke. I really like Zeke's ability to banish an opponent's monster, but the effect to send Area 0 to the graveyard to buff it to 2500 attack and then summoning Ray or Roze from the deck means you can essentially put up 4k damage if your opponent has a clear field. And if you have the Roze in the grave, you can potentially actually put 5500 damage on the board. Either way, Zeke is nice. If you banish an opponent's monster in the EMZ, you can trigger Roze in grave, like I said earlier, to special summon herself, and then you can go into an Anaconda play, and that's like a big brain play right there. Speaking of which, we have the one copy of Predaplan Verte Anaconda and the one copy of Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. I truly believe that Dragoon gives Sky Striker a much higher ceiling because the problem usually with Sky Striker is that it's hard to OTK or put up a lot of damage on turn 2. A Dragoon summoned on turn 2 can put a lot of pressure on your opponent, essentially putting him on a clock. And that's especially true if you have Roze or Ray in hand for the next turn kill. I've tried the pure Striker build, and what I don't like about the pure build is the inconsistency. Like I said, in the pure build, you will oftentimes just lose because you don't open a Sky Striker starter. If engage was at 1, or if somehow it ever came back to 3, one can only dream, right? Then yes, I would hands down play the pure build, but for now, I'm sticking with Sky Striker Dragoon. Then finally, finishing off the extra deck, we are playing the one Crystron Hawkeye Fibrax, the one Celine Queen of the Master Magicians, and the one Access Code Talker. So this might be overkill, but can you imagine playing against Sky Striker with Dragoon in the deck? You get over the Dragoon, and then next turn you see your opponent go into Access Code Talker to end the game? That's wild. That's wild. Again, this play is so strong because it's only a 2-card combo that gets you into Access Code Talker with 4 pops usually minimum. And that's it for the deck profile. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed this Sky Striker Dragoon deck profile. And please let me know in the comment section below what you liked or what you would change. Constructive criticism is always welcome on this channel. I make videos with the intention of learning and always getting better at this game so many of us love called Yu-Gi-Oh! Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.